All set?
I'm all set.
Awesome. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the VoV podcast, Voices of Vic. Different setting here today. I am blessed to be joined by Vic President, the 14th President and Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University since July 1st, 2022, Dr. Rhonda N. McEwen. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I have to tell you that at no point in my early years did I think I would like to be president of a university. It was not in my sights. You can't fight this because right now it's producing about a B- essay. Right?
Censorship is only going to last here for so long until eventually it swings down the other way and it's the Republican censoring.
Correct.
What do you think about that email?
Right.
Did you have any involvement in that email? Did that protest that was against this LGBT education go against Vic's values?
The Supreme Court has said that liberty means the rights of parents to parent their children and to...
Because there are people who agree with the stuff I'm saying. They're not as loud because they're not allowed to be.
We're a microcosm here for a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
Right? At Vic, what do you think? Do we have a lot of young men that look and sound like you here?
I feel it is a bit more of a feminine environment.
Don't touch people, even if they're wearing what you think is some advertisement in your culture to touch. This is not how we behave.
I see the rainbow flag here more than I see the Canadian flag.
Yeah. So student organization sanctioned a student who went up for... Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds to me more that the biggest crime there was more using the wrong research.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's a pleasure
Thank
to chat
you very
with you.
much.
I'm so glad you said yes.
And even to do it in the President's office, absolutely. I can't be more grateful. All set?
I'm all set.
Awesome. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the VoV podcast, Voices of Vic. Different setting here today. I am blessed to be joined by Vic President, the 14th President and Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University since July 1st, 2022, Dr. Rhonda N. McEwen. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
So we're going to get into a lot of conversation here. Once again, very much so appreciate you coming on. We've had a professor come on for an episode, Juan Carlos Rocha Sornio, great guy.
Yes.
But this is the first, I'd say, executive. How would you describe the role you're in these past 2 years?
I think we call ourselves senior administrators.
Senior administrators, okay.
But and I've been doing it a little longer than 2 years, but 2.5 years here at Vic, and then some time before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've received 3 degrees over your career: an MBA in information technology from City University in London, England, a master's in an MSc, in telecommunications from the University of Colorado, and then your PhD at U of T in information.
That's right.
So a long academic journey to get you up to this point. Previously, you were U of T's first special advisor on anti-racism and equity, as well as UTM's vice principal, which was your role right before President
Right
of
before
Vic.
this one, yes.
Got it. Okay. So walk us through the entire come up to here, because there's plenty of people, plenty of students, I'm sure, who see your position and perhaps one day would like to serve as the president of University of Toronto College. You spent a lot of time in academia, so I'm wondering how you think on your journey up until this point.
It's a really good question. And you would think I've answered this many times, so it would just be like, let me tell you. But I think it always requires some reflection, like I look back at all of the times, and I have to tell you that at no point in my early years did I think I would like to be president of a university. It was not in the goalpost in my sights. And not because I didn't think I could do it, but I wanted to be in business. And I was a management consultant for years. Yep. That was my big career before getting into academia again. So I spent time with Deloitte and with IBM. And I started with Deloitte in the US right out of my master's in telecom in Colorado. So they hired me right out of that program. I'm not from the US. I'm actually from the Caribbean. So they were like, well, where would you like to home? Which office? And I was like, any office?
Yeah.
New York? Right? Well, why not? And they were like, how about Atlanta? And I was like, Sure, right? I don't have anybody there, so it doesn't matter. So I was in Atlanta, worked on projects everywhere, so I didn't really spend much time there. But one of the early projects took me back to London, which is where I did my MBA. And so I kind of re-entered a place I knew before, and I had a great consulting career. I really did. Like, I traveled in Europe. A lot of my clients were in the UK as well. I met my husband while I was doing that. He's Canadian. So people are like, how'd you get to Canada? Well,
Yeah.
I fell in love with a Canadian from a very small town in Eastern Ontario.
Awesome.
Town of 700.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
What's the name of it? Maybe
Westport.
Westport.
See, you don't even know it.
No.
But if you ever drove from Kingston to Ottawa on the old road and before you get to Perth, Ontario, some people know Perth.
Yep.
Is this little town called Westport, and
Wow.
so that's where he was from. So we met. He was also at Deloitte, and so we met there. Got married, and then had a problem because neither of us really were from the London office. I'm from the Atlanta office. He's from the Toronto office, and we're like, married in London.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? And eventually, I said, let's go at least where one of us have family. So we moved back to Toronto. So that's
Absolutely.
kind of so. But I'll say this: like my consulting career in this role as president. Because I look after not just Victoria College, but also Emmanuel College.
Yep.
And I don't do, my previous job was running all the academics for the Mississauga campus. I do none of the academics here. The principals of the two colleges, they are in control of all the things the students really
Yep.
see. I am in charge of the buildings here, the finances, the HR, any issues with alumni or any opportunities for advancement.
Yep.
That's that's what I do. And you got to think, my MBA is what makes me good at the job, right?
Right.
And I trust and I help hire really good people to do the other parts.
100%.
And they've been doing a phenomenal job. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So that was actually a question. I did want to get into that later on
Yeah.
about the difference between, like, some students might not know, between the president of VIC, the principal, and
Oh,
even
yeah.
the dean of students, so Kelly Castle.
confusing, yeah.
And what is the distinction between the three jobs mainly? You just lined out more that the principal is more student facing, but
Right.
let's say even the difference between the principal and the dean.
Absolutely, big differences. So I kind of outlined my part, which is, all the stuff you see and hear and maybe touch. The residences, not running the residences,
Yep.
but making sure that we have enough housekeeping, making sure that we have heating and cooling and the roof is intact.
100%.
That's under me.
100%.
But for example, the Victoria College principal, and we just installed a new one yesterday, Alex Hernandez, he is in charge of all academics for Victoria College.
Okay.
Everything. So anything with curriculum, anything to do with the faculty that teach within VIC, the relationship with arts and science for U of T,
Yep.
he maintains that academic relationship. So he regularly meets with the dean of arts and science to make sure that our programs are working well together. He will decide, for example, by looking at the demographics, whether we have more students coming in from commerce
Yep.
or coming in through sciences or through literature, right? And how to adjust for the students. So that would be him. The dean of students, a very different role. That's more student life. So it's non-curricular.
Okay.
So it's all the kind of extra things,
Got it,
right?
got it.
So, there's this program called Ideas for the World where we bring in community members, meet some students, and they do some amazing programming. The dean of students would be in charge of that. Wellness, so counseling,
Yep.
but not academic counseling because
Yep,
that's the
yep, yep.
registrar.
Yep,
So, but all the kind of mental health and wellness. If there's yoga in the Margaret Ad Field, that's
Yep.
probably coming out of there. If you want to, get some basketballs and shoot hoops, you go get your basketball there. But also in terms of residents. So one of the things that I worked closely with the dean on, I didn't like that we didn't have an ability for students to stay over the breaks
Yep.
at VIC. And it's not just at VIC, it's kind of a U of T thing. You just, close your room and go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And like the idea of students just hunting for somewhere to sleep, especially post-pandemic.
Right.
Some of the students couldn't go home.
100%.
And so I was like, so now I would make that pronouncement. I would like the students to stay over the break. And then the dean of students would have to implement that
Yep.
and figure out how to make that work.
Got it.
So that's kind of the big differences. So nothing to do with the curriculum. The dean doesn't touch any academic curriculum or faculty issues. That would be the principal. The principal, on the other hand, this principal loves meeting students.
Yep.
So he's already created some kind of come meet the principal thing.
Yeah.
So he will have relationship with the students too. He will be
100%.
student facing, but not in the kind of co-curricular way that the dean of students would. And also
Absolutely.
discipline, I guess the dean of students has to deal with any disciplinary issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's the difference. Ladies and
There's the
gentlemen.
big difference.
You've heard it. Heard it here first. This is the most trustworthy source you can get.
If I don't know,
Yeah,
we got
100%.
problems.
So you say you're from the Caribbean. If I
Yes.
researched correctly, Trinidad and Tobago
Good for
is
you.
your home
Well done.
country?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely.
Some people say the wrong thing, so points.
Absolutely, 100%. What landed you in the U.S.? Why did you move?
Right. So I actually got, you would hear about the Rhodes Scholarship, like that's a big one, and 2 VIC students just got Rhodes this year.
Yep.
I got the Chevening Scholarship,
Okay.
and I was in Trinidad. I did my undergraduate, so that's actually the 4th degree. The first one was actually in Trinidad. I did my home country. I did my undergrad. And from that undergrad, I received a scholarship to any university in the United Kingdom, which
wow.
is why I liked the one I did, because
Yeah.
Rhodes is only Oxford, but I was like, I want to choose my own.
100%.
And I did end up choosing City University of London, and I did my MBA in IT there. And that landed me in England. From England, after my degree, I worked with Cable and Wireless, which is a big telecom global company.
Yep.
They had some interest in the US, so I did some work in the US, and then I said, I'll just go do another degree. Why not? So I did an engineering degree in the US, so that kind of got me to the US. And then from the US, that's the story of getting hired by Deloitte,
Yep.
back to the UK, and then love got me to Canada.
There you go. Okay, incredible. I'd never heard of the degree for information, PhD in information and
Yes.
telecommunications and all this kind of thing. I was looking into it. I was like PhD in information. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
So it's pretty, I guess, relevant to today's age, especially with your specializations being in social media, new media, this type of thing, mobile communication.
Right.
Are you working a lot with, I guess, maybe I should ask you also, is this the first podcast you've ever been on? Have you done something like this before?
I have done podcasts, but not I don't think like this. I don't
Okay.
think with a student and
Yeah,
really
yeah.
student facing or having people hear about what I do. I do more boring academic kind of
Fair.
podcasts.
Fair enough.
Nothing that I would ask you to subscribe to. But yeah, so it's not the first time, but I'll say this. When I did my undergrad in Trinidad, I got into chemistry and management because I'm a STEM scholar, and I took a year off. My father was almost having a fit because he's like, she'll never go to university. She'll get the taste of salaries. And I was like, I took a year off. Then when I went back, I switched majors and I switched to management, stayed with management. And I switched to sociology, which again, my father was having a small heart attack. Like, what will you do?
Yeah.
He's an executive.
Right.
So he's like, what would you do in sociology? But what I had an interest in was seeing how technologies, because I did management information systems, how those technologies affected people. And I was like, I don't know anything about people because I did biology, chemistry, physics, math. So I was like, I'd like to know a little bit about the people side. So I did do a double major. That got me, I've never left that. I've always combined tech in some way with people.
Yeah.
Currently, my work is with AI and cognition. So I do, how are these technologies affecting the way that our brains process information, and or how do people with cognitive disabilities manage in a world now where there's so much digital.
Yep.
But my PhD in information was all about digital. I seem to have hit everything right in the moment where it became exciting.
Yep.
So about 5 years ago, I started working on large language models. No one knew what I was talking. Like,
Right.
we would talk amongst ourselves about GPT 2 and 2.5 and 3. And then 2 years ago, OpenAI went with ChatGPT.
Yep.
And my research was already in place. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, and yet again, right place, right time.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's been good.
How do you feel about ChatGPT right now, especially in the academic setting?
Ooh.
Because for me, when it first came out, I was hearing rumblings of like all the students were trying. It was at the end of
2022.
I think so.
Right?
I think
Yes.
so. And students were blown away. It's like, no way this thing can write. It's not like there's no code. You just speak to it like you're speaking to a human being, and it does exactly what you need.
I
And
know.
from what I heard, professors were trying to get on top of it. A lot of students were sharing I don't know if it was a rumor. I'm assuming it's a rumor, but professors wanted to get on top of it by saying that they already developed a software that can scan if ChatGPT has generated this text, which is kind of a good tactic to use because finals were coming right up. If people had essays, they were like, I don't know if I want to play with that.
Right.
But even today, like I'm sure, once again, there's a lot of this. It would be academic misconduct, but you can't catch it. Like, what do you do?
It's so interesting. So I am going to sound very atypical of a faculty member, although I am very much a faculty member.
Yeah.
When it first happened, like in January of 2023, I heard the same things you did. I heard it worse because I'm on the back end in the faculty lists, watching the faculty go, oh my X, this is going to be bad. Yeah. Right? And so I actually wrote an op-ed for the Toronto Star. It wasn't for the Toronto Star, for whoever took it. Toronto Star took it. And it was kind of, I think in the title is something like, stop worrying, you can't fight this because right now it's producing about a B- essay, right? And that was 2 years ago. Almost 2 years ago. So I was like, we have to think differently about how this will affect things. So I'm pretty pro-science, I'm pro-tech, even when I know there's some nasty consequences. I don't ever think, well, either the technology is the thing that we have to fix. I think it's always about how we deal with the human side.
Absolutely.
Right? And so for me, it's more asking the faculty, can you be more creative in your assessments? Do you have to give the same old kind of assessment you've always done? Or is there a way to think about what is it that we want the students to understand here, knowing they're going into a world where people will expect them to use these tools?
Right. Yeah.
So it would be like very rough comparison. Don't let them use calculators ever.
Right.
Well, you can teach them how to do the computation and then say, okay, now that you understand that, you should be able to use this, and you need to know how to do it well. Yeah. Right? So I would say we do need to teach foundations of good writing, good research, but you also have to recognize students are going to be expected to be good at this. Yeah. And where do they get to learn that? But in the academy too. So we have to get better at saying when to use it, when not. Things like this. For me, an ideal way to deal with this is to say, everyone, do your first draft using Copilot, which is the one U of T's, I think, signed on to. And then show me what Copilot offered. Now, take what Copilot did and show me all the places where Copilot didn't do as well as you could do. Right. Show me the gaps, right? Show me the way that Copilot may be skewed or biased in one way versus another. What research did it lean on but not? How could you make it how you take it from a B- to an E? Yep. Show me that. And if you and that's an assignment where students get to learn how to use it, but also learn where the down pieces are on it, but also get better at editing through and using their own intellect to put on top of that. And I think there'll be many other examples of things like that, but I think that's how we have to think about this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's interesting how you bring up like what it's producing right now is about B-. So I think people understand that there are professionals in the world who do exceed the capabilities of ChatGPT in any one domain. We're obviously talking about someone who's, let's say, dedicated their life to physics will be better in physics than ChatGPT, but won't be better at everything. Right. There's obviously going to be some things where the physics professor can't produce a B- in English or whatever. But I think that the issue is, once again, anyone below B- historically, they've been able to produce in the world. They've been able to contribute to society. Obviously now there's this takeover, I think, that's happening where you have businesses who probably have a better incentive to get ChatGPT agents than the guy who can do C+ jobs. Right. So years down the line, this is my last year in university. I'll be graduating after this. But
heading out to the world.
100%. So what does the job landscape look like 10 years down the line after this is in full-fledged effect?
I'm going to be one of those people who's come out there and be honest about it and say that I think for the first time we've hit a technology that actually will change our job landscape, right? It will change our employment landscape. You know, before we'd be able to say, oh, the tech will take away all the kind of jobs that people don't like to do, and now all the smart stuff is available for humans, right?
Right.
I actually think the large language models are pretty darn good at some of the both the boring traditional report writing kind of thing, but also good at ideation.
Yeah.
So I have a student in my lab. She's a Vic second year, Natalie Uhalian, and we worked on a paper together, but it was her brainchild. She's presenting in Venice next week, I believe, on creativity. What do AIs do to the idea of creativity? And nobody wants to touch that because they're like, oh, humans will always be the best creators.
Yeah.
But in the work that we did and that she spearheaded, we could see that actually for the first time, it's not just a tool. These technologies are in the ideation area.
Yeah.
That's where I think we have to recognize there are jobs that will be affected and not blue collar. Like before it was like, oh, it's going to be the lower end jobs affected. This will affect all the way up the chain.
Yep.
And I think we have to be ready for that, right? I think it will transform the way of work that we know it now. But I think not to say that you're graduating and forget it, it's all gone. Not at all. There always will be places where, there are also places where we cannot let the machine be the final call.
Like what?
I would say anything that has the potential to hurt or harm humans in any way is easy. But let me give you an example. What about who gets a loan? So you're graduating. I don't know your situation, but there are many students who may need to get a loan to maybe start a business, maybe they're entrepreneurial, whatever. Usually there's some algorithm, but there's usually a human who makes the final call on this. There are things that people will pick up. When I read about you on your resume, that's one version of you. But getting to meet you, look you in the eye, person to person, get a feel for you, there's a sense that humans will be able to pick up on certain things. Now, true that there could be bias, and it could be the reverse, where on paper you're perfect, and then I meet you, and then I come up with some reasons why not to. I didn't like your shoes or whatever, right? I wouldn't have seen that on your resume. But I think by and large, there on decisions like home ownership, getting a loan, ability to access social services, things like that. I think machines making those calls may be problematic, or at least a human has to be the one who makes the final judgment.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And there's plenty of them. One I've heard is law enforcement. Let's say they could weaponize, let's say, the mainstream biases that we say police officers have, but I don't think I trust the robot to necessarily, give me, like, because when you're pulled over, when a police officer pulls you over, there's humanity there, despite the tough persona that they have to put on. They do see the value in you, whereas the robot is saying, did you break the law? Did you not break the law?
Very binary.
Exactly.
Right. And it could be, there are extenuating circumstances that a human would be able to pick up on and help make an adjustment, maybe slap on the wrist versus, and I think you're right that there are some places here where not sure we want the machine. We've read all the sci-fi, haven't we?
Absolutely.
We've seen the movies.
Who do you think, maybe I shouldn't say who, but how do you think it would get into place? Because I feel like when you talk about it with people, everyone's like, yeah, we got to be careful with AI, but just eventually nobody necessarily is there stopping it. It just starts moving inching in closer and closer till it's a reality in everyone's lives. My kids it's going to be a completely different world.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be asking ourselves, how do we get here? Nobody thought this was a good idea.
Right?
So,
and we will remember these conversations.
Absolutely.
I wrote a different piece for the Hill Times. Again, this is the kind of sexy work I do. Hill Times, that's federal, but it's Ottawa newspaper that no one reads but the politicians. I am not pro government involvement in technological evolution. I've argued actually on the other side for most of my career. Let the best come forward. Let's compete. This is the first time I've actually written, I think we need some guardrails here. I think there's potential for harm. And we've seen it already in small pockets. And you could see how just what you just said is the thing that sits in the back of my mind too. We'll look back one day and go, what were we thinking in 2024? Like, did we not see down the tunnel? It was kind of obvious that this was going to happen, and we let it run. So I think there need to be some things you talked about. So somebody needs to put in guardrails around law enforcement, around, you know, political interference. We're seeing a lot of talk about this, and it's easier than we think, and it's been happening longer than we think, but now it's becoming more prevalent on all sides of the political spectrum, right? The ability to get in there and manipulate people and manipulate systems. It's there. So I think we do need some policies, and we do have the ability right now, without adding a single thing. Our legal system usually comes in after the fact. So something's happened, then you get your lawyers in, right? Policies try to go ahead of that. They're like, okay, let's put in some rules for people to work within. Then if there's something, law comes in. So we have both sides already. I think the parts we need to think more strongly about is, are there things unique about these technologies that our current policies and legal system cannot really deal with? And there are a couple things. We have guidance, but there are a few things that are a bit of an open gap that need to be closed.
100%. On that matter of, I guess, the political ramifications for it, we've seen obviously what's happened with social media. I think that it's driven this generation. Like they say, Gen Z is the most political generation that there's ever been.
Absolutely, I believe
young
it.
people are more politically involved than they've ever been. Like nobody used to care about politics. Now everyone's
no one cared about the young vote as much as they do now, honestly.
That's right too. Yeah, 100%. And the thing, like we have watch parties. There's plenty of people who are like, it's not even our election, it's the U.S. election, and people are like, this is incredible. And I wonder, once again, is it intentional? Are people once again taking advantage of these systems? Because like AI, for example, you'll search certain things, and right now, I think especially with the mainstream big tech companies, we've seen evolution where it was leaning more in favor of the Democratic Party. So Mark Zuckerberg came out, I don't know if you saw this, but he was basically, I don't know if he was being pressured or whatever happened. Maybe he just wanted to oust the Biden administration, but he was saying that we've been pressured to censor COVID information over the pandemic, and we don't think this is good. We're going to apologize now for it. But even though right now it's the censorship coming from this side of the aisle, I think that life really works as a pendulum, and to let this kind of thing slide here, even if, let's say, you're in favor of whatever they're censoring, let's say you agree with the Biden administration stance on COVID, censorship is only going to last here for so long until eventually it swings down the other way, and it's the Republican censoring.
Correct.
This is I think this is a law of nature.
And you've seen it. We've seen it 100%. Time and time again. And it's always, I'm always surprised when people are shocked, because it's not actually, it's not a one side or the other. It's a way of thinking about things. And if we have agreed somewhere tacitly that censorship is okay, it's going to be okay for everybody.
That's
and
right.
then you can't scream when it comes and you're the one that your stuff's just stuff that. So I think that's absolutely right. I think that's a problem, right? I really am all for, I don't like right now that we're so divided, and it's weird that we're divided this way, because if you meet people person to person, you realize we're actually a lot more similar in most of the things that we believe than others. There will always be fringe issues that we don't agree on, but that's human. That's, that's diversity.
That's where the conversation comes.
That's where the conversation comes in. And my job, one of the jobs I didn't talk about of the president, is to create as big a tent as I can. I cannot be dragged down into defending one side or another, in the same reason, because that pendulum will come the other way. And what I have to make sure is that I've created an environment where people should feel like they can speak. And it doesn't matter if everybody doesn't agree with you. Everybody doesn't agree with me. I'm sure you have people who don't agree with you. And that's, I have not yet met a person who is universally, everyone is going to agree with you. And so we have to recognize that, I say this to people all the time, you can't have the number one pillar for VIC, right, in our strategic framework is belong. Belong means that whether the censors, I shouldn't be censoring you or you. That's not what I deal with. I'm trying to do the big tent. Everyone gets to be here, and everyone gets to be a member of this VIC family, even if sometimes in the family we don't always agree.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break for the camera.
I heard a little beat.
And we'll jump right back into it.
No problem.
Quick 5-minute break.
Yes.
We are back. Mics are looking good. Awesome. Okay. So I believe we were left off. We were talking about censorship.
Yes, that's
We were
right.
talking about this kind of thing. A huge, I guess, reason that I wanted to start this podcast was to give students a platform to speak their minds and to kind of share ideas and express, I guess, their opinions in a way that is free and open and anyone can come on. And it's also a point where I have to kind of temper the growth of the podcast, which kind of makes no sense. You'd kind of think you want to make it as big as possible, but I want to let everybody come on. So if it's too big to a point where I have so many applications I can't get every guest on, it's kind of doesn't really work. Yeah, it kind of ruins the whole point of the brand. The idea is if you want to come on, you can come on. There's an open invite to the entire college, the entire university. So I was curious for you though, what is your view? How do you feel about free speech, free expression as the president of this college?
Well, first, let me say, I really commend you. I read that in your byline of your podcast saying, this is an open platform and I will talk to anybody. And I think right now there's so few people willing to take that risk. It's a lot safer to be hanging out with people who just say the things you say.
100%.
Right? And so for you to do that is very admirable. And I'm sure there are risks that you've taken in that. I really believe in free expression. And to say that means that as a university administrator, I feel like universities are one of the last places we have right now where we can, and it's eroding, right? We see how much I talk to students who want me to cancel this one or cut down that one or amplify this voice or say these are VIC values. And I'm always like, first of all, in our culture, speaking of sociology, see, I learned something. Things evolve over time, right? There's no such thing as VIC values from 1836, I'm going to tell you right now, to now have changed.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
The Burt Carnegie, there was a men's reading room.
Okay.
Right? Only men could read in this room.
Yeah.
And now we're revitalizing it, and it's going to be open to anybody.
Awesome.
Because really,
I think that was the right move.
I think so too. But in 1836, if somebody had said to me that it's going to be open to everyone, I'm sure in that time that was not progressive. That
100%.
would be seen as wrongheaded. I think we have to remember that things change. Now, free expression, to go back to that, it's really important. If you say people belong, if you really believe that we should have, we talk a lot about Canada about having diverse and all these international people and all this, but then you don't want them to speak and they have to conform to one way of thinking.
Right.
Then what was the point?
Yeah.
Right? There's no point to this. So there's free expression. There is a line, obviously. There's legislation. Yeah. There are codes of conduct. We don't want people to, on the one hand, one person's freedom cannot make another person feel impoverished or locked away, right? So it's the contract, the social contract, is we should be free in a way that allows others to also express their own freedom.
Yep.
Right? So that's the challenge.
Yeah.
So freedom of expression, absolutely. I will defend it at all costs.
Yeah.
But as long as we stay within the bounds of no hate speech, no whatever, there's a good long list of that's legal language, and no one should feel threatened to the point of harm. And I'll get back to that. And I don't mean intellectually threatened. I mean physical harm, right?
Right.
We are in a university to be challenged.
Yep.
And that is perfectly fine. And, people say to me all the time, well, I don't like what that person said. That made me feel unsafe.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, were you actually unsafe? Let's unpack that. Were you actually unsafe? Because my job is to make sure you are safe on this campus.
Yep.
I've got guards. I've got, right? I've
100%.
got the locks on the
army.
doors. I got things here.
Yeah.
But if you feel unsafe because ideas you previously held are being challenged, and that is making you feel uncomfortable, I'm going to say to you, try and step into that a little bit, because that's why you came to university.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
And it's this thing is that people talk a lot about creating a safe space, and it blends in too much. You were talking about that line of free speech. Where do you think that when you say hate speech, this is a term that I talk about with people often. what is hate speech?
Yeah.
What does it mean? Like where's the line? Because I think something that people have seen recently on the two sides of the aisle is that one person says this is hate speech, another person says this is not. This is how I talk. Main example, we're at the University of Toronto, Bill C-16 a few years ago. I don't know if you were at UTM then.
Yes.
When Jordan Peterson was making a big deal.
Yes.
Obviously now he's world renowned for coming out and speaking the way he was speaking back then. And a lot of administrators, a lot of his colleagues did not support him standing against this compelled speech. It's not necessarily about what you can say, but it's now what you have to say.
Right.
And you were talking about you can say what you want to say as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's freedoms as well.
That's right.
In an example like that, which is a hot topic today, do you think that pronoun use would categorize as free speech infringement? Do you think that that's an act of hate speech if someone decides to not call this person she or they?
So step back. Yeah, I was at UTM exactly when this was happening. Most of the UTM faculty, I'm still one of them technically, we do have graduate homes in St. George. So I was at the St. George campus. All my research was at St. George at the time as well, at the Faculty of Information. And so I knew quite a lot about what was happening and the discussions there. So it's really interesting. Hate speech within Canada has a very specific legislative bar. It's not ambiguous.
Okay.
Like when people say they don't know what it means, it actually is quite clear.
And what is there a list of words?
Yes, it's not there are a list of. It's more like a type of word.
Okay.
It's not so much a specific list because the list will come and go and so forth. But there are some conventions already. The UN has some language and so forth, so it was kind of codified in a particular lens. But what I will say about it is, hate speech is kind of more or less speech that tries to make someone, it actually brings, it's almost portending a kind of a physical harm. So it's almost saying, like, for example, I don't like what you just said. Like, I will kill you. Like, that is literally language that you are intending to do harm to this person.
100%.
If there are historical words that have really deep historical meanings to them. Talking about lynching someone has a very specific meaning, right? And that comes from a culture and a context where literally people are being hunted down and killed for, come out vigilante, like society making a decision instead of the legal systems. So there are things like that. There are words that lean towards things like anti-Semitism, very clear that this is, speaking of genocide of a people who went through that is deemed as hate speech because it has particular historical context. And I think there are many examples of that. Pronouns are interesting because pronouns, I was speaking to actually a Vic faculty member, a gentleman who's been studying languages forever. And he's actually writing a book about pronouns because he comes at it from Spanish, French, Latin, right? And then English. And looking at how pronouns are used across the different is very interesting. For example, in the other languages, the other Romance languages, the pronoun it is used very specifically to refer to people. So that's a completely different conceptualization than in English. For us, it's like it means non-human, right? There it's not. Also, there they use pronouns for objects, right? So those of you that did any languages, a glass or a table has a pronoun associated with it, which we in English almost never do. So there's some very specific context around that. With respect to people, I think where it gets difficult is when it's about identity. We kind of talked about identity a little bit earlier with people's political identities. And identity is very close to the core of a person. And I think this is where it gets the most difficult for people. For some of us, call me what you want. I'm Rhonda McEwen. It doesn't matter. But for some people, it matters a great deal. It actually is part of a bigger fight that they've had to live with their entire lives, or it is a piece that they are still grappling with and trying to get people to understand them in a particular way. And I think that's where it gets very troubling, right? I'm on, I do see some relevance in saying, if I want to identify as a Trinidadian woman and you refuse to use that language with me and you call me other things, I could see how that becomes, it would feel like an attack on me personally, right? Versus an intellectual argument around this, which is not that personal. And I think that's where I can hear both sides and I can see where they're both coming from. But from human rights, I prefer to think about this as a human rights issue. If you choose to say I'm a refugee and I want to be deemed as a refugee, and you refuse to deal with me on that basis, it's like a refusal to deal with me to some extent. I can see how people could see that as hateful. Like there's something about refugees that you refuse to deal with me. And I think for pronouns, some people, it feels like that. On the reverse, some people don't want to be seen as a refugee at all. Don't call me any pronoun. I don't want to be associated. That's not part of my core identity. And it's not equal for everybody. And I think that's where we lose our humanity a little bit when we go one way or the other. Back to our other conversation. It's like pendulum swinging, right?
Yeah.
Can I choose not to be interested in this? And that's okay for you? And can I choose to be almost only defined by this? And that's okay for you? Right. And are we okay to deal with people along that spectrum?
100%. So with the refugee example, that's interesting because I feel like with that, there should be at least some objectivity, no? Because someone comes in and claims to be a refugee, even though they say they are, they might objectively not be a refugee and just want to take advantage of whatever systems are given to the refugee. So should there not be at least, like with pronouns as well, I'm of the belief that there is some objectivity with gender. A lot of people like to say gender and sex are separate. They're not the same thing. I think that whether that's the case or not, which I do believe there is a biological basis to gender, we're talking about this infringement on other people's freedoms. Of course, you think I'm infringing on your freedom by not calling you the pronoun, but you're now forcing me to say something that I, at my core, don't believe in. I think that this is false.
Yeah.
So, like, once again, you're talking about the both sides, but from the way I see it is that there's the infringement coming from someone enforcing language on another person.
Right.
So it's tough to go from I'm going to kill you, which is clear that speech should probably be pretty restricted, to she is a very pretty girl. Oh no, I'm not a girl. I wasn't trying to kill you there. I made a mistake.
Right.
Sorry. Even though maybe I didn't make a mistake, but obviously you want to be called something else.
Right.
So where do you think that line is?
So on the refugee thing, I think luckily, that's codified stuff. But it's not whether you are or not. So that's an objectivity there. You either are a refugee or you're not.
Right.
But do I want to be? Do I want to wear that as my representation of myself? Even though I am a refugee, let's say, which I'm not, but let's say I am. Do I want that to be the headliner for me when you introduce me to someone? Maybe I don't. And I think fundamentally, if we could get to the point where we could respect that it's okay for me to be a refugee, but ask you not to call me a refugee.
Yep.
Like, or there are others who literally want to wear that as their number one thing.
Yep.
Right? Before
100%.
you say anything about me.
100%.
So I think, and it's with pronouns, to me, the issue here is, if it matters that much to you, like this is just my personal perspective on this. If it matters that much to you, it's about who you are and you fundamentally, then I have no issue with making the effort.
Yep.
I'm going to get it wrong sometimes.
Absolutely.
And hopefully you'll forgive me, because my intentionality is not to deny you as a human and your choices. But if that's where you need to hang your identity, if it's most important to you, I can try and meet you there. It's not and similarly, if it doesn't matter to me, then you don't need to ask me constantly to identify as my pronoun. Because for me, I don't feel it as important, and I can tell you that.
100%.
So, it's not a big deal to me. Other people, if you tell me it's important to you, I will try and accommodate that, even though we could disagree on the rationality as science or not science, right? For me, that's where my human side comes in. I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I work a lot on cognitive disabilities. I think this is where this comes from.
Yep.
People on the autism spectrum, we used to get into massive debates. Can you say you're autistic or are you a person with autism, right? And this became this thing where you'd go to an academic conference and people would slay each other for just saying what the other thought was the wrong way of saying it.
Interesting.
Really interesting, right?
Yeah.
And people who were actually autistic would be like, I'd like to be called autistic because I don't have cancer.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I literally have neurons that are wired. So call me autistic.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get better.
Right.
Right. And I don't want you to expect that from me.
Right.
Other people also on this spectrum don't want to be autistic. They don't want a label. They want you to say, hey, I'm Rhonda. I'm a little bit different.
Yep.
Whatever. If you want, you can say I'm on a spectrum. I have a spectrum disorder, but I'm not autistic. It is not what defines me.
Right. 100%.
What am I supposed to do? I'm going to do. Often I say to people, how do you want me to characterize you?
Yes. Yes.
And it does tell us something about the person.
Yep.
That choice,
Yep.
right?
Yep, it does, 100%. And if I was at a restaurant
Yeah.
with a transgender person, I
Right.
would not go out of my way to intentionally try to debate with them. And
No,
if they want to be called she and continuously call him he,
Right.
then I'm not going to do that. But I
Yeah.
think the issue is when it gets into law.
Right.
I don't know if it should be illegal to be mean. Because if you're
Right.
disrespecting someone's pronoun, let's call it mean. Okay,
Yeah.
You're being a mean person. Does that mean you should go to jail? I don't think
Yeah.
that's I don't think that's where it gets a little bit dicey for me. It's a bit too much control, a bit too authoritarian to say.
Right. Well, this is always the case. So even when we talked about AI, right?
Yeah.
Where's the line?
Yes.
And a lot of our hardest parts are trying to walk that line and figure out what is it that we're trying to achieve here, right? If we're in a restaurant, as you said, there's no benefit to creating unless I don't know, the discussion is about that, right? Right. But generally, you're just trying to have a meal and have a fun time.
Yeah.
You're not going to get yourself locked into this. The legal system has to come from what makes the most sense for us to work in this social contract together effectively. So often I don't think these things pass into law because, as I said earlier, it comes down to cultural norms. You know, were there always people who were, you know, some people think gender like autism is on a spectrum.
Yep.
Right? Again, there are debates on all the sides of that.
Yep.
But if we think that could be true, that some people express more this way than that way, and that's who they see themselves as, is that a law? Can we make that legal? Because when things change 20 years from now, 100 years from now, not that they're not on the spectrum, but the way we express that changes, then we change the laws again, right? I think we have to remember what we're trying to do is create an environment where everyone, as I said, feels like they can be themselves. Sometimes that does put pressure on other people in that tent, right? And we have to figure out how we work with that.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be more tolerant. I think what I don't like the most is the intolerance, like just being like, I refuse. I'm like, well, everybody has the right to refuse. But if we all refuse all the time, we're not going to get very far, right? At some point, we have to make a concession and we have to accommodate, right? And we do. And there are times in your life where you're like, this is one I will not accommodate. This is one I don't want to concede on. And that's your right. But for the everyday running of things, we accommodate every single minute of the day. We do it. And I just think there has to be room for us to debate and times for us to step back and accommodate. And we just have to figure out that balance.
Right. Yeah. I think for this is the only thing is that the fundamental, I guess, the bedrock of what we've created here in this country of freedom is, well, in the USA, the First Amendment is free speech. And I think it gets extremely dangerous when there's no explicit threat. Once again, we talk about accommodating.
Right.
I'm for all of this.
Yes.
People should be able to be themselves. And if someone wants to beat someone up for being a different pronoun than they'd like to call them, obviously we should condemn that.
Yeah.
And it'd be better if maybe someone else came to the defense and said, you want to fight this person, I'll fight you first. This kind of thing. This could be a way to deal with it. But to bring down the hammer of government, now it's like, okay, this is, how about we let the people deal with this? When we get the law involved, when people are being forced to be so accommodating to a point where there is legal ramification. There's punishment on the table if you aren't nice, according to this person. I don't know. I think that that's something that students here definitely talk about. And like you said earlier, you're saying how absolutely as the president, you have to protect free speech. You believe in free expression, all this sort of thing. Something I wanted to talk about was you did mention how some students will come to you and ask for you to perhaps define Vic's values in this way, or say, I don't like what this person's saying. Can you perhaps get a control on this? And you're like, listen, life's so long. The world could change very fast. And if I put this rule in now, there could then be someone who disagrees with you, who takes advantage of what we've done here. We have to make sure it's free and fair the entire way. An example recently was this Queen's Park LGBT education protest that happened. And I made a video on here about that. It was got a lot of reception. But I think that right now, the pendulum, we're at a point where we are saying, I'm not saying this is a point where the LGBT, pro-LGBT education people are saying we need to create environments in the school where if someone does not feel comfortable coming home to their parents and expressing themselves in a way, obviously in this case it's with gender, if a 10-year-old boy wants to be called a girl at school, the teacher can call him a girl at school and have no connection with the parents.
Right.
I say that, I see that, and I say red flag, because personally, I'm not too affected by the idea of coming home to my parents and wanting to be a different gender and they're not letting me do that. Like I don't have that issue. But down the line, let's use an example. I think that this law can now, imagine it's passed in a way that someone who is pro-LGBT relationships between teacher and student in elementary school, it could swing the other way where now perhaps you don't believe in a teacher enforcing certain religious ideologies. Perhaps now there's a Christian teacher who's having a talk with your kid about Jesus, and he came and he saved you from your sins.
Right.
Don't talk to your parents about it. Trust me, this is the facts. You're not going to like that. You have to make sure that it works on both sides.
Right.
So I think that there's a pretty clear view in this case of saying make sure that it's the core unit that should have the most say, the most authority, the tightest community has to be between the child and the parent. We're talking about teachers and students as if the teachers love the kids anywhere near as much as the parents do. So I don't know if you have kids.
I do.
I'm sure you understand how important that relationship is. And it's good to have sympathy or empathy for these students who perhaps don't have the best relationship with their parents. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every child-parent relationship is perfect, because that's not the case. But I think that you're going to do more harm than good if you allow this sort of policy to come into place, as we're talking about. You have to be ready for it to hit on both sides. And a lot of people wouldn't be willing for that example I gave.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I'm listening to, as you were saying, giving that a particular example, like I kind of, you and I would seem to like the long view, right? So I was thinking, we did almost exactly do this at some point in our history where, right, where teachers were like converting kids, residential schools. Like there we in Canada, we know that this is a thing. And we did allow this sort of thing to happen, and now we're like, ooh, that was terrible, right? I also really like that you recognize that we all don't have the same amazing households and relationships. Like, parents do the best. I'm a firm believer in every parent is doing the best they can, but we all came from our own environments. We're learning as we go. Often it's making mistakes. I do know that when I have heard, and I have a lot of empathy for situations like the ones you kind of described, where maybe at home is not the place where they feel psychologically safe. There is abuse, unfortunately, in some households. And abuse comes in many flavors, right? Some people there are things they would never say to their parents, ever. Like, I'm sure there are things you have never said to your parents, right? Like, I can think of a few things I've never said to them when I was growing up. So there is point at which you're trying to figure out, though, where then can that happen? Schools have obviously been in the next place. Teachers will, despite any relationship a teacher has with a student, they can never have that kind of loving relationship. They can care for their students, but not in this way we're talking about, I don't think. But they certainly try to help a student develop to their maximum potential. And I think if for some people, that environment is more nurturing than the one at home. It's possible that students will come out to their teachers before they do at home, and maybe even seek guidance on how to handle it at home. Now, what you're asking is a little different, which is to say legislating that right in those conversations. Can I turn it in a different way? And I'll say, no matter what we do, whether we put in a legislation or a piece of legislation or not, there are going to be students who share with their teachers and guidance counselors and whatever more than they do at home. And that will always happen. Doesn't matter whether do we need to codify it? I think it comes down to the rights of the child. This comes out of a kind of a UN convention on the rights of the child. That this idea that children have rights, first of all, is super modern, right? Like Industrial Revolution, children had no rights. You are going to go work in the factory. Here you go. Your hands are particularly small and work in these very small machines really well. So you're perfect.
100%.
Now this idea is a more modern concept that children do have rights. They have a right to be, a right to thrive, a right to eat, a right to education. There are rights. And this is kind of one of those things where does a child have the right to talk about gender expression outside of the home without parental involvement? And do parents have to consent on it? We're not through on this. This is why it's such a hot topic, right? Anytime you enshrine something in the rights, it's pretty hard to get it out once it's there. But I guess what I'm saying is I kind of have, my son, if he watches this, he's going to die, but I have a 17-year-old son. I remember going to some talk and then coming home at dinner table and saying, listen, Dad and I are totally fine. If you we will love you no matter what you are or who you are. I try to remember how old he was. He was younger. But he just had this blank look on his face. And then he kind of cut us off eventually. He was like, just relax. I don't know what's happening. I don't even know why we're talking about this. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm going to be the most boring of the boring and whatever. But
he went and changed his outfit.
It's like, but I feel like I wouldn't have maybe had that conversation. Nobody had that conversation with me. My parents did not talk to me about this.
Right.
So I feel like I had to learn by hearing to try and bring it to my family and help my kids just tell me anything. Like, as you say, you probably could do it with your parents. I know there are people who can't. I know I've seen them. They've come to my office hours. I know, and I feel that pain, although I can't empathize because I never had to deal with it myself. But I can't imagine how debilitating it must be to not be able to talk to the people who you think should have your back the most. And so I understand why this is a thing. No, I'm not answering which one I think it should be. I do know once you codify it, it's a serious thing. And we have to be very careful what goes into the rights. But if you look at it from a human rights perspective, which age, how early it should be, those are the parts that get in the detail. But the right of a person to decide who they are is part of freedom of expression. I'm okay generally with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
100%.
I think people should be able to go to Queen's Park and have their perspectives. This is the big tent that is Canada. We have to be okay with this. You have the right to protest. That's your right to go for it. That we should say you should not say anything. Your view is the one we don't want to hear. Or yours is the one that's better. That I have some concerns.
Right. The reason I ask is because the students, I don't know, once again, if you were involved in this, you say you're less student facing than perhaps the principal or the dean. But the reason I ask is because the students got an email saying that this protest, which was against the private relationships against the education of LGBT topics was strictly against VIC's values. So I'm saying, okay, this clearly you guys aren't thinking about this side. It's going against VIC's values. What? You want private relationships between teacher and student so that one day when this LGBT movement gets taken over by this side, it's also going to be an issue. I think that we need to have a discussion about this because there was a warning that was put out and saying if you are going through Queen's Park, stay safe. Obviously, anytime there's a protest, absolutely. But there was hypocrisy because the email encouraged students to participate in the counter protest if they were going to do so safely. Right. So I'm saying, all right, that's why I'm here now talking to you. It's a great opportunity. I'm wondering what do you think about that email? Did you have any involvement in that email? Do you think that did that protest that was against this LGBT education go against VIC's values?
I think I may know the one you're talking about, but I'm not involved in those particular ones. I'm pretty sure when I heard about it and I inquired, it didn't come from any of the senior administrators either.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this was sort of an email that was sent by a student leader. If we're talking about the same one, I think it might be. Yeah. Who interpreted things in their own way and put it out to one group, and then it went past the group into some other residents. I think it was into the residences.
It was from the Dons because it was...
Which are some of the student leaders, right? Yeah.
Back-to-back years, I got the exact same email.
Right.
So I don't think it was from like
the
Don specifically. Like you said, perhaps someone who manages all of them, but I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, no. There isn't a central management, but it flagged for me when I heard about it that there needs to be some administrator who looks at communication. Now, we can't look at all the communication coming from the Dons but something in the way that we are preparing the Dons, or that there may have been something that we missed here. And I think it was really good to raise it. Certainly it wasn't from an administrator, I can tell you that. What concerned me most about that was the point that it's not saying what you want to say is whatever side you're on this, take care of yourself here. Things could get heated. Yeah. I think that's the message. And I think if that were the message, that maybe would have been, so that's neither nor, either or. Yeah. VIC values, the VIC values are enshrined in the 4 pillars of our strategic framework, which is online. Everybody can read it. There's no VIC value statement anywhere. So for me, if you want to talk about VIC value, you got to go to this thing that is written. Yeah. And the first thing is belong. The first pillar is belong. But that means, though, I didn't say who should belong. Yeah. Only X people from this place with these. Yeah. And if you're not those things, you do not belong. Right. Is that belong, it says that everyone should feel that they are a VIC student and this is their campus, that we are their administrators. This is their program. This is where they live. They should feel comfortable and safe to do so. That is what belong means. So for me, if something is said that makes some people feel, what am I not? So I'm not VIC values. I don't belong here. Then there's a problem with that. Right. So
do you think, that email from, once again, not that you necessarily read too deep into it. Yeah. Do you think that was a mistake?
I haven't seen the specific one we're talking about, but I think if that's what it said, that only these people should be worried about their safety and these people, whatever, by implication, should not. Yeah. I think that's not the way to put that out, because that draws divisions and lines, and it says something that our principles don't say. Yeah. Right? Like the other one is encounter, and the other one is like explore. If those are our values, then that's saying go explore it. Yeah. Explore means something you don't know much, right?
100%. Yeah.
Go explore. Do it safely. It should say something like, we care about the safety of every VIC student. Right. That's what it should say. Yeah. And if it doesn't say that, then it needs to be amended.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, there you go. I wonder, okay, so once again, free expression. I want to stay on this topic a little bit. When the community itself, there's no presidential overreach, there's no rules in VIC saying we're going to suppress these people.
Right.
You guys are saying belong.
Yes.
Everyone should belong. Absolutely. We're getting to a point where perhaps there's a culture beyond Vic. There's a culture that is just this generation, this new young generation with social media. There are certain views and opinions that you're not allowed to say. And it's not, once again, there's no punishment, because I've done it. I've
Right.
said things that you're
Right.
not supposed to say.
Right.
And not once have I heard a word from Vic saying, take this down.
Right.
So I completely respect you and everyone in charge for letting me run this podcast openly and as freely as I've been able to do it. Now, within student body,
Right.
there's this pressure where if you don't conform
Right.
to this side, to this opinion, because I've heard the worst of it. There are people at Vic who despise VOV
Right.
because they keep hearing things they don't like hearing. And I'm saying that's life. So for people, because there are people who agree with the stuff I'm saying, they're not as loud because they're not allowed to be, because they don't have these cameras, a podcast.
Right.
They don't have people listening to them. If they say something, not only will the people who disagree with them come out and stomp on them, but all the people who are afraid of getting criticized for not stomping on them as well will come and take them out.
Right.
We talked about earlier how there are people who don't really have too strong of opinions on certain issues. They just want to fit in, but by not condemning certain things, they're not fitting in. So it's kind of this hyena mentality where if someone speaks out, it's your job to get on him because he's either not accepting enough or
Right.
does not value things that these people do value.
Yeah.
So as a president, it's hard. I don't think that your job is to necessarily come in and try to rig the culture, try to be a
Right.
puppet master of saying it's too unfair. It's just naturally it kind of just ended up that way. What do you think about perhaps promoting a culture where you're fighting against the tide, because every university is probably struggling with similar issues?
Absolutely.
How do you think that you can change this in your role, if you
Right.
can in any way?
Oh, you're pointing out, like, we're a microcosm here
Yeah.
for a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
Right? And why is it a problem? It's a problem because we've kind of, the same things that we criticize people for, intolerance, not being open,
Yep.
not respecting, we're now using those same tools against the other side.
Yeah.
Right. And we didn't improve it then, right? We just kind of tit for tat on this. Like,
Yeah.
I beat you, you beat me back, and we're gonna have a big old brawl.
Right.
And that's what's happening in in society at large,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. So this is why we keep talking. You keep hearing this new word, these new phrase, civil discourse, right?
Yeah.
It's become kind of hot at U of T, civil discourse. And civil discourse, people think civil in the civil discourse means kind.
Right.
Like civil, like uncivil means kind of unruly, and civil is all nice. And that's not what civil actually means. Civil
Yeah.
and civil discourse means the civilians. So more participation, more people talking.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
counter to what you're thinking? Everybody's leaning into this argument. So civil discourse says we have to learn where to speak, when to speak, how to speak to whom, but we should be okay that others are speaking too. I study social media as I came along with emerging media. I know we all know it creates echo chambers. We all know. But what we don't remember way before that part, forget the tech. The tech is amplifying something that humans do anyway.
Yep.
There's this thing called homophily in network analysis that says basically birds of a feather. Homophily says that I like to hang out with people and be with people who are kind of like me.
Yep.
They don't have to look like me, but they need to think like me. They need to eat the things I like or go and do these kinds of activities I like. Birds of a feather. When an odd bird gets in the cage or whatever, like we're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Attack!
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's take it out because it's not like us and it must be bad.
100%.
And we don't stop to say, okay, hold up. This bird sings a bit differently. It may not eat the same things we eat.
Yep.
Is there anything we could appreciate about this bird, or do we really have to kill it?
Right.
Right? But so right at this moment, we're in this super intolerant mode in general. Not just, this is not Vic, this is in general.
Yeah.
We've got to fix this. This is not okay. This will break down society in a much more dangerous way than we're even thinking of
Yeah.
right now. this is why everybody's always shocked at the election results. What?
Yeah.
How could they have possibly won? I'm like, what were you listening to and reading?
Yeah.
You're only listening to the things that everybody like you's listening to. You didn't listen to the other 80% over here that have been saying something.
Right.
You refused to listen.
Yeah.
And now you ignored them because they don't exist.
Yeah.
You've killed that bird. And now you're shocked
Yeah.
when things turn out a different way. I always say to people, you'll be shocked at the things I read and the things I listen to and the things I watch. Because I need to know I need to understand what's happening here. And in the broader community. I hate not knowing, like, what that feeling of where did that come from?
Right.
Is this like antithetical to me? I want to know. I don't have to agree. I don't have to like it, but I need to know.
Yeah.
And we have to get there. It makes me very disappointed that in universities, we are not leading the way and showing how to do this better.
Yeah.
Because we are supposed to be the critical thinkers.
Right.
Right? We're
Yeah.
supposed to be able to go out and listen to other opinions.
Absolutely.
We're supposed to be able to say, oh, that was under-researched. I didn't love what you said, but you know what? You made me think about something that I hadn't thought about before. I still haven't changed my mind, but now I kind of appreciate your perspective.
Yeah.
That's all it's not a high bar. I actually hope that it's a better conversation that goes, actually, you taught me something.
Yep.
And maybe my opinion's a little different than it was before we started talking. Is that so hard? I think that's the goal, right?
No, absolutely.
So for me, we've got to get back there. What can I do? I can create forums and opportunities for these conversations to happen, right? I can do podcasts in places where people would think, well, why would she be on a podcast? I'm definitely going to do that podcast for sure now. I will send boring articles to Ottawa. I will be in the Toronto Star. I have to try and here I will encourage and pay for lunchtime discussions. There's one that's just wrapped up. Dean of Students Office actually ran it, called Difficult Conversations, and they talked about from race to religion to money to things that we don't talk about around the dinner table because family members could get upset.
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation?
Yeah.
The answer is not how to make you think, how to have a conversation. And that's a problem if we can't crack it here.
Yeah.
So my job is to do as many opportunities, invite scholars who have different kind of viewpoints.
Yeah. I was going to mention that actually.
Right. So I'm doing it, right? Intercultural, I'm calling it the presidential intercultural initiatives, right? And I'm bringing in people we had a Palestinian Christian come and talk about peace, how they've been doing peacekeeping. Like, what?
Yeah.
And it went really well. And I'm proud that at Vic we were able to do things because there are parts of this country where you can't have these conversations.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think for me is that, like you said, with these speakers, these scholars who perhaps come in, a lot of the time when I'm looking at the Vic news feed or going on Instagram, Vic College, when I see an advertisement for this person has come to speak about this, my brain automatically goes to, okay, this is okay to say. This is okay to say.
Right.
This person, this is fine.
Yes.
But I never see something where I'm like, whoa, they're inviting this guy?
Yeah.
No way.
Well, it happens, right? People don't get as excited about them.
Interesting.
But we do. We have had speakers across the spectrum. We had
who's perhaps the most, I don't want to say controversial, but who's perhaps the most, I would say university typically is a more liberal,
neutral, liberal,
environment.
Safer,
So exactly.
Yeah.
So who's someone who would come in who's perhaps like the most conservative speaker, or perhaps threatens that people feeling safe, people feeling like, oh, I have my ideas. I don't want to be challenged necessarily on these topics. I don't want to think in this way because when I do, it just gives me trouble. I don't want to spend the cognitive resource, to consider this argument. Is there a person?
Well, I would say over time there have been many.
Yeah.
Right. In recently, the most recent one I could think of is a really interesting one that we did it with Hart House. So it was Vic plenary.
Yep.
It was not a mandatory one, but it was a plenary. And I don't know if you know who Pamela Paul is.
No.
Pamela Paul is a New York Times writer, opinion writer. She got into some interesting waters for agreeing with J.K. Rowling on gender.
Yep.
And so she was on panel. That was only a couple months ago. October or September, somewhere in there. And we also had Janice Stein on the same panel, and Ian Williams, and Ryan D. Boyagoda was the kind of moderator. And it was really interesting because she herself has been canceled for her views. Would we let our VIC students hear from such a person? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, it was an interesting debate with Janice Stein, because Pamela Paul was like, everybody should be free to say whatever they want to anybody they want to say. True free. She's in the U.S., right? Freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And Janice Stein, who's Monk School, big political or a public policy expert. So much respect for Janice Stein, saying, yeah, I agree up to a point. Like, I think you have to think too about where you are and who you're saying it to. I think sometimes you do need to censor yourself.
Yeah.
So they were on the same. It was interesting, right, to hear the two perspectives. And I think what we did at VIC to make, I had made a promise to a couple of student groups here that if we do invite people like this, we will give them a heads up.
Okay. And
we will also give people the right not to attend. Fair, right? Like, we won't force you. Like, just to your point, I'm not going to indoctrinate you in some weird way. So if you don't want to come, don't come. Like, you know, this is probably going to be raised in this discussion. We welcome you bringing somebody. I'll bring somebody else with the opposing view. Happy to do that too, right? And we did that, and then we had it, and it went.
There you go.
But see, you didn't hear about it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people are being a bit sensational about things too at the moment, where they only want to talk about this one, or the ones they want to publish are the ones again in the homolophagus. Is that a word? Like homophily. These are the values we like, so we're going to tell you about that. Yeah. But you may not hear about the other ones that are happening.
Right.
And it didn't turn into a brawl. So it's not newsworthy now, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's not like you said, sensational.
Yeah. It was not.
You don't clip it. It's if it doesn't sound crazy right off the hop. I mean, I know myself with this podcast, like the biggest
the ones
clips
that go. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's got to be some guy screaming and it's like no consideration for the other argument. This is how it is. It's like
so this conversation probably will not be hot.
No, we'll try to chop it up. I'm sure editing magic, anything can happen. But
I really do think that's my job.
Yeah.
My job is to say yes, to put in place, protections for people who feel like they need it. Like to say, don't come we're not going to make it mandatory. You're not going to be marked down for not coming to this one. But I want it to happen. And you know what? We had a huge turnout.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. The first years.
Why make the warning just for these specific speakers, though?
Now we make it for all. Even the one with the Palestinian speaker, we made the thing to say, look, if this is going to be difficult for you. We had an Israeli speaker come at Emmanuel College, and we also had said, look, if this might be a lot for you right now, and we respect that,
Got it.
Don't, if it's too much, don't.
Yeah.
But we hope you come.
Yeah.
In all cases, please come.
100%.
Right?
100%. Yeah. I think that's important. I think that people, like you said earlier, this idea of safe space for a university, like an intellectual safe space, that's not really what it's meant to be.
No.
I think that, like, especially like nowadays, a lot of the people pushing this forward are these more progressive types who are like, we need to feel protected, to do our work, to study what we want to study. And I'm like, that's not really, if I think of the women's liberation movement from however many decades ago, the idea was that they didn't think that they needed to be constantly sheltered and protected and overseen or looked after by men. That was the idea. And by coming in today, and they were saying we can confront difficult conversations and we can talk about hard ideas and have these back and forths without needing to be sheltered. Like we can do it as well as you can. And now it's completely flipped where people are like, we need a safe space. We can't hear things that we're not, okay with hearing. If it makes us upset, it should be banned. I'm like, whoa. This is going against what they were fighting for back then.
What's funny? You just said the word progressive, and like literally progressive conservative PCs are the word progressive. I think this word progressive has gotten like, I don't know what's happened to it.
Right.
Like progress is to be able to move forward, like or at least move somewhere, right? There's an evolution and a change coming, right? That's progress. To be progressive, then you have to be moving and you have to be able to be moved, if you will. it's not easy for everybody. And I think even in the women's liberation movement, there were women who are like, I can't handle this.
Oh, yeah,
This
100%.
is like, I'm staying home and I'm going to keep cooking because I'm good here.
Yeah.
Fine, right? Do that. But be okay with other people being all right to do it, wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And let them have the space, because that's real freedom of expression.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I'm curious to ask you about the academic side more so. I guess it's kind of philosophical in a way, but university, you come in 17, 18 years old. I was 17 when I got here.
Yeah.
You have 4 years typically. What is the university experience? What is your time here, the 4 years you spent at Vic or U of T or just university in general? How is it supposed to change you? What is I want you to kind of just talk about what is the person when they come in compared to what they are when they get out?
Boy, that's such a good question, especially because 17 is the new normal age, right?
Yeah.
The person that comes in 2 months before was likely in high school. I think people forget this, right?
Yeah.
Somehow over July and August, you've matured into an adult of some form.
Yeah.
I think for me, university is a lot about ideas and exposure to ideas, and a way of thinking, a way of being able to construct an argument, to deconstruct an argument, to be able to learn some deep skill. I want to be a physicist. I'm going to learn the tools and techniques there for sure. But it's really about making you a better human at the end put. And for me, better human isn't in a particular direction. It's better from the 17-year-old who came in.
Yep.
And heard some new things, challenged some new things, stood their ground, learned how to construct and deconstruct those arguments, came up with some new ideas themselves. There's, creation, knowledge creation happens in university. But at the end of the day, they go out and they can be a citizen, be a Canadian, be a wherever you're from.
Yep.
That people could say, there goes a good, solid human.
Yeah.
That for me is university. If you're coming out and you've become either apathetic, you don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're so far on what you care about, you can't listen to anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know. You've progressed maybe.
Right. In perhaps the wrong direction.
Maybe not in the direction we'd hoped, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't expect university to turn out. I don't like this idea that university is a liberal engine or whatever. And I'm saying liberal in the sense of Canadian politics here. Yeah. I think university is for everyone. When people say to me, EDI, who is it for? And I'm like, it depends on who you have. Mm-hmm. At Vic, can I ask you how many, what do you think? Do we have a lot of young men that look and sound like you here?
That's a good question.
Right? And it's a good question because we don't even have the numbers. I don't have the data.
I feel it is a bit more of a feminine environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? I just found out 62%.
Women.
Vic.
Wow.
62.
Yeah.
And I could kind of guess it from looking at convocation.
Yeah.
Just doing a rough count.
Yeah.
Now we have Ansley Hall, which is an all-women's dorm.
Yep.
So obviously, for as many beds that are there, we're probably
Makes
skewing
sense.
over that number. It makes sense. But I think in universities in general, across the world, it's skewing to women.
100%. It used to be 90% men.
Well, the men's reading room was humongous.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Why do you think that's shifted? What's been the driver for that?
I actually think partially there were a lot more men in university, and I think it wasn't open to women until later, right?
Yeah.
So that historically it was already skewing. Faculty members still, even with the number of women in university, still skewed to men.
Yep.
So there's still this there's something going on there where more women are coming through but not getting through at the next level. So you're being taught by a certain group of people as well. I think that right now I've been reading a lot of what's happening to young men in society, and I'm interested. I have a husband, I have a son, I really do think that the education system is being more and more constructed in favor of success for women.
Yeah.
I think or the things that the way that we're teaching, the methods, the techniques are favoring one kind of group And,
Right.
and I'm sorry I'm being so binary about this. Obviously, there are people who see themselves in the spectrum in there too. I'm not talking about gender or sex or anything. I'm just saying that there's a way of learning that it seems to be you be quiet in the classroom,
Yeah.
do what you're told, here are the assignments. No, unruly, behave yourself.
Yeah.
There are some young girls who are definitely ADHD and also high spirited. Maybe
Right.
I was one.
No.
Who talk too much in class. Maybe I was one. That doesn't work as well in the modern day education system, right? It's a very compliant,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, developmentally, there are a group of us that don't do well under that.
Yeah.
And it takes longer for us to. So to me, when young men are peaking in the system's already kind of cut them off.
Yeah.
So they don't get to I don't think they're getting to university. Also, you're in a system that made you feel like you're not able to do it and you're not worthy of it. So you're like, you know what? I'm just going to go and run my own business. I'm
Yeah.
going to go right into I'm going to do the trades. That's where all my people are.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what I think is happening.
Hang
We've
out with
kind
the
of
boys.
sent a message. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
hanging
yeah.
out with my guys. Right? This is what's happened. And then we hear, unfortunately, there can be toxic cultures in there and all the rest, which I am not shocked about,
Yep.
honestly. But I think we are not doing enough. I have a worry. We need to make sure that balance happens.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be that universities become a place for men.
Right.
Or sorry, for women,
for women.
and not for and hostile
Right.
to men.
We'll talk more about it. I'm going to flip those batteries.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were talking about university catering perhaps more to women, and the teaching style is very, I guess, conducive to them. Boys, especially young boys, they once again sit down, do as you're told. I heard the whole education infrastructure, the whole system was invented. It was I think mid 1800s in Chicago when they were having a bunch of the townspeople move in closer to the city to get factory jobs,
Right.
basically. So that's why everyone's lined up in rows and you have bells and this kind of thing, because it's basically you were moving to the city to get a factory job and your kid was probably going to grow up to work in a factory as well. So it was the Industrial Revolution. Of course, we're going to teach them in this fashion, in this way. And once again, sit down. It's hard to get that energy out, especially for young boys if they're too rowdy. It's kind of how they're supposed to be, though. This is what
Developmentally.
Yeah, exactly. So in university, when you say perhaps we can't lean too hard into, this institution becoming primarily for women, even designed for women, because we're seeing this once again, 62% at Vic.
Right.
What do you think we can do to achieve a little bit more, I guess, encourage a bit more masculinity? I think a big thing, this isn't necessarily Vic specific, but U of T, there are no men's sports leagues. No sports divisions specifically for men. You have the women's division, mixed, which is men and women, but there are playing rules for women, meaning if you're playing hockey, there's 5 players. You need to have at least 2 women on the ice at all times. And then you have open, which is the most masculine division, which is basically men and women, but there are no playing rules. You can have 5 guys on the ice at the same time. You're not forced to have women playing at any specific time. So I think this is something I've realized this past year. I've been the captain for the Vic hockey team for 4 years.
Okay.
So I
did not know that about you.
It's an incredible experience.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. It's developed my leadership more than I could
great.
possibly imagine. But I think that there are some games, and the women on our team are great. They're always there to show up, and they're fantastic. The games where it's all guys, it's a little bit more. People are a little bit more rambunctious. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even talking about on the ice, but just in the dressing room.
Right.
You hear guys cracking jokes that they wouldn't crack if there was a girl in the room. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You want to be respectful. You don't necessarily want that masculine energy coming out around women. We want to be a little bit more, courteous in that sense. So what else do you think? Like, what do you think about that? The fact that there's no men's sports divisions in U of T.
That's so interesting. Okay, so first I'll say
I'm just going to double check these cameras.
and please do. Yes, please do. Don't worry, I'm a tech person. I know what this is like.
Yeah, sorry.
And if you don't check, the one time you don't check is the time it will not work.
Every time I get super paranoid. We've had enough malfunctions in the past, and I was like, this is a very important interview. I'm going to make sure these things are working. So anyway, sorry, please continue.
Well, the idea of masculine and feminine, of course, changes over time, right? And I think what was seen as masculine, 1920 is probably not the same as what you would say is masculine now. And I say that as somebody who's traveled and lived in different parts of the world. And I come from the Caribbean. If you have not been to the parts of the Caribbean, it's got a historical idea of being a super macho culture, right? Like, man's man. Like, there's a beer in Trinidad called the man's beer. Like, you could never have that here.
The man's
like,
beer,
a man's beer. It's still called that.
Yeah.
Not a person's beer.
Right.
A man's
beer. Yeah.
So the idea of masculinity for me, I have in my own time and travel seen that people do that differently. I think what I don't like is when what is called masculine is just masking, as you said earlier, bad behavior. Like, so that's normalized into, well, it's okay. Boys will be boys. If they grab a girl and treat her badly, that's just
you can't do that.
Being a guy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you're right. That's not what you're not talking about that.
Of course not.
You're basically saying, and I will also contextualize the fact that I came up through science and technology.
Yeah.
There were many times I was in the cable room or wherever, and I'm the only woman, and they kind of forget I'm a woman at some point because I'm always there, and
stuff slips out.
Stuff. I don't even know if it slips. I think they're just like, hey, you want to be here? This is how we.
Good point.
And they called it industrial language. I thought it was so funny. They're so I've heard my fair share of it.
Absolutely.
But you're raising up really. So I'll say masculine and feminine. I don't know what that means anymore. Every culture I have to figure out, like, what does it mean here? Like indigenous cultures, what is actually forget indigenous, but it's similar. I just came from Hong Kong. 2 weeks ago, men and women would be holding hands in public, walking around. Men with men, women with women.
Yeah.
And they weren't gay. They were not LGBTQ2S plus nothing. They were this is just a cultural thing where they do that.
Yeah.
I was watching K-pop stuff on the lot of makeup. Yeah. And if you're into K-pop, I'm not so much, but I'm fascinated by the fact that eyeliner, eye makeup is not seen as feminine.
Right.
Actually, these are dudes, and they're like super popular, and they're really, quite attractive to the opposite sex. Yeah, but they wear a lot of makeup. And here, I know people would be like, what are you doing?
Question
right?
it a little bit. Yeah,
right?
100%.
So even now, I think those boundaries are a bit culturally defined. I think in sport, one of the issues with sport is that, unfortunately, and hockey gets a bad rap for this, although basketball's in there, football's in there, I don't think it really. Soccer came up under a huge torch the other day. What was bad behavior was being explained away as just being a guy. And unfortunately, that has kind of made people put in some new perspectives on this, right? Also, not enough women were being given the same shot as the guys. I mean, the women's soccer team, I have to hesitate every time I say soccer. I come from football being soccer.
Yeah.
But Canadian women's and the US women's soccer teams argued that they should be getting paid for being professional athletes the way that the men do. So we still have some weird legacy disparities. And I think some of these mixed leagues and all this stuff was in a way to try and compensate for that pendulum, right?
Yeah.
Where are we we've gone from it being all this here, maybe we're two here. It's going to have to settle into where it belongs. But I don't know if I'm against having men having a league, just as women have a league.
Right.
I'm kind of maybe a little surprised I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I assumed there was. Right. And I don't know the rationale for it. I don't. I'd need to do some research on why we've done that. But yeah, it strikes me as interesting. Is it like the men's reading room where we're like, it needs to be co-ed now?
Yeah. Right.
Or is there a different reason why we did that?
Yeah.
Is it a resource issue? I don't know. So I don't want to pronounce on something I don't know. But I feel like I don't have a particular opposition that there could be a men's league. When my husband goes to play shinny on a Thursday night during the day with all the guys in the neighborhood, I'm 100% sure I do not want to be in their shinny league.
Yeah.
Right? As a woman, I want to do my own thing. And I'm sure that they can be amongst themselves and in a different way, that kind of what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So as long as it's not just hiding bad behavior and toxic stuff, and because men have been unkind to men in those spaces too.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, right?
100%.
So as long as that's not the issue, I don't know if there must be some other reason. I hope there's another reason, and not just because we don't want men to be together.
Right. I think that it's important to foster a positive sense of masculinity, like we were saying. There's this term that's thrown around a lot about toxic masculinity. Yes. I understand what they're talking about, but I think it's a bit of a... I don't like the term because it says that masculinity in and of itself, it's meant to be good. It's meant to protect. I think that when you allow men to get together and to foster that kind of, energy, brotherhood, exactly. Yeah. You're gonna make them stronger. Now here's the issue: you're gonna make the bad guy stronger and the good guy stronger.
Facts.
The good king, the evil king. There's gonna be both of them. But I think it's better to have strong, good men to at least defend,
moderate,
defend and be there to protect. Because if we have if we make the good men weak, if we say you don't want to be toxically masculine, it's okay that there's no men's leagues, this kind of thing, and they can't exercise any sort of, like, once again, practicing that brotherhood, practicing being a man, then when the how do you say, the outlier, when the outlier who is the bad guy comes in, we look around, where are the good men to stop us from this tyrant? Nobody's there.
And you know what, you totally nailed it earlier when you said something very similar, where you said, you have to have that other influence in there, otherwise basically you've neutered everything.
Yeah.
Right? If you took what you just said into politics right now, people would be like, because in a way we've silenced, you said it with students too, nobody wants to be the person to stand up anymore, because you just get shot down, you get hurt so badly for saying anything counter the loudest voice. But I don't like, I found the term here when I got here, and I'm here 22 years, so it's not yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm Canadian. But I don't like bullying as a term. I think something happened along the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Where everything became about a bully, and then the bully, everything was bullying. Like my son would start saying it, like, stop bullying me. I'm like, I'm not bullying you. I told you pick your clothes up off the floor. Like, I don't understand what that's bullying.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I'm like, I'm being a mom right now. And that's what moms say.
Yeah.
Pick up your nasty stuff and put it in a dishwasher.
Yeah.
So I think language is a really powerful thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I kind of know what you're saying with the toxic. What I think I worried about when I kept hearing toxic masculinity, I know what it's trying to say.
Yeah, yeah.
But it kind of equated almost all masculinity with toxins.
Yeah, yeah.
And you put
100%.
two words adjacent.
100%.
And what happened to the men who are non-toxic masculine?
Exactly.
Is there such a thing?
Who are non-toxically masculine?
Yeah.
Well, they've kind of stepped back. They're like, everyone's saying masculinity is terrible. U of T has now made it so that I can't even hang out with the boys at a hockey game because there's no league for us anymore. What's going on?
Right.
If I guess they either decide to, just shallow in. A lot of guys resort to video games or smoking weed, or even porn addiction is a bad thing for young men, or they completely go the other way and start supporting all this stuff, and they join these are like the male, very, I guess, the more feminine men who are into this I guess it is just more liberal, of being very tolerant of everything. Like, I'm not saying that tolerance is bad. Everyone knows that there's an importance for tolerance. We can look at history where people were intolerant and it turned out very bad. But when you have to, especially for men, there's a key component, especially being a father, which is saying no to things. If you say yes to everything, your family's going to die. Okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're going to let the burglar into the house. Sometimes you have to say, no, this is, I'm not doing this.
Right.
And it's happening now with, I haven't seen too many videos, but there's an immigration conversation happening in Canada.
Yes, there is.
And I've seen videos online of women, and these are liberal women in Canada, who are talking about how they understand they don't want to be labeled racist, but they're saying these newcomers have different customs than we do. It's not necessary. It's not about race. It's not that they have a different skin color.
Different
We have
practice. Yeah.
Exactly. They just live differently in this place and they're coming here. And this masculinity, this toxic masculinity is coming up again, where you have these newcomers who think it's okay to touch a girl like this. They're at a club. It's fun.
Right.
She's wearing this. Obviously, she wants to be touched like
Right.
that.
Right.
No.
Right.
Now they're freaking out and they're saying, what's going on here? We need to fix something. The fix, in my opinion, would have been the native men, the good men from here who would step up and say, hey, buddy, back off. That's not how we work. Unfortunately, they're not around. Where are they? They're gone.
Well,
we kind of banished them from
certainly-
society.
They're less in the university. Now, there are parts of the university. I know somebody's going to listen to this and go, oh, Rhonda, I totally forgot. There are entire departments here where it's mostly men. And I get it.
Definitely the sports teams as well are pretty tough.
Right? So I know that in science and it's still in engineering and they're working on it and they're trying to encourage, as long as you're not discouraging somebody or finding a way to make sure the girls don't get into engineering.
Yeah,
and
obviously.
that's definitely not happening.
Yeah.
But I will say in general, like if we look generally and do the average, we are skewing a bit more towards women. I will say this, like if we are creating an environment where the young men cannot feel like they are here, like, and they have to be a kind of young man to be here, the kind of
Yeah.
that's the problem, right?
Right.
Because we do need
A little bit softer.
Yeah, well, and I even that word softer bothers me, right? So is nice soft? Is kind soft?
Right.
Are these soft things? I don't think they're soft things. It can be very hard to be kind and open.
Yeah.
And these things are hard to do. It's actually easier in some ways to do the other thing, right? Yep. So that I'll put aside and say, we have to do something about it. I actually have been raising this at the level of Universities Canada. I'm heading the education committee for all university presidents for all universities in Canada right now. And I say we have an issue where our guys, and how do we make sure that we are creating environments that are good places for this citizen to, fine. So that's one thing. On the immigration thing, I'll say, I think I met a fairly new immigrant. As I said, I'm too old and an immigrant to talk about this in a real kind of way. But he was saying, I came to Canada and I started driving here and I drove in Country X. And Country X, driving is pretty nuts, right? Like, not a lot of rules. People just going for it. And I came here and I was like, holy, everybody's different here. Oh, you wait for your turn to come off the exit. Right? You don't reverse down this highway. That's not a thing. And they were saying, I love this. This is so good. And so very quickly, I think if we have enough moderating supports around immigrants, they will know the way it's supposed to be here. Dean Castle, who's Dean of Students here, talks all the time about the work that we do in orientation. Orientation is not, here's where the bathroom is and here's how to find a student advisor. It's don't touch people, even if they're wearing what you think is some advertisement in your culture to touch. This is not how we behave. So we have to do some of it as education. I've helped a newcomer family settle in Canada. The things they didn't understand, and they came from a culture that didn't seem like it was going to be as far away from here but it was. And they learned very quickly. Within their time here, in like 7 years, they were already like, you cannot do that to other people. This is not how it works here. So I think it can be done. So I think a lot of the worrying, sometimes we over dramatize some of that because it's always been like that. Listen, when the Irish came to Canada, my husband, who comes out of a Scottish English background, he's like, they were not seen as classy humans. They were to go up into the hills and stay there. Do not come down on market day, then take your little self back up there with your people, right? Don't come. You're not one of us.
Right.
Assimilation takes time. People come to understand. We create a new thing. All of this now becomes Canada. I think we've seen it happen and we can do it again. Right? But there's some maybe missing link in how we are culturating people into the culture. Your water is under your chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was looking for that.
I know it.
Anyways. But yeah, that's a good point. I think that nationalism is another topic that people perhaps are thinking about now, talking about a little bit. Something that I did also want to bring up is the importance of a national identity to be proud to be Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that, at least in Vic, I feel is not emphasized enough. I think that I see the rainbow flag here more than I see the Canadian flag.
Yeah.
And I think that is a little bit of
the Canadian flag was there, and I don't know who took it.
No.
I wonder. I have been wondering what happened to my Canadian flag. Oh,
It's right there. There's the magnet.
oh, good God.
There it is.
They hid my flag.
That's beautiful.
There you go. That's upside down. I'm gonna fail my citizenship.
But-
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Go
So I think that the reason that I kind of take a little bit issue
Yeah.
in that is that the national flag is meant to be the symbol of unity.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that we cherish here in Canada, everything that we, talk about, we've been talking about this tolerance, this
Yeah.
inclusion, diversity,
Mm-hmm.
all of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think is to be credited to that red and white flag. Whereas when we have international students come here, they're
Yes.
seeing this rainbow flag instead. I
Yeah.
think that the credit belongs to the Canadian people.
Right.
And people see a flag and they attribute it to all sorts of different things. They attribute it to the history of the country, to the government of the country. I think that the flag is the people's flag.
Yeah.
The flag belongs to the people. My father's Mexican.
Yes.
I had a Mexican flag for the longest time. And I was like, I don't really know if I should walk around with this, because the Mexican government,
I know.
the Mexican government's a little bit dicey. I don't know if I should be representing that, but I realized later on is like, this flag isn't the government's flag. This is
Right.
the people's
It's the
flag.
people's flag. And I think
100%.
every national flag has to be the people's flag,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I have my little Vic flag too, which is
There you go.
my favorite flag. Although I need to get a few more. They're starting to look a little faded. The newcomers, there's an idea that you assimilate. In Trinidad, we have a dish, and it always uses as the example, but it's bad because people here don't necessarily know what I'm talking about. But it's like you put like 6 ingredients or 8 ingredients into a pot, and then when it's finished cooking, you take a thing and you grind them together.
Yep.
And so it becomes like one soup. Every spoonful now is all of it together. Some people believe that that's what it means to create a national identity, right? It's like one thing. There's the other view that says it should be more like a set of Skittles in a.
Yeah.
You still, that's the orange one. Ooh, that's good. Together, they are a thing, one thing. But you can still get the different flavors. You get to be a little bit Mexican sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You get to be, but you're still 100% Canadian.
Yep.
I'm still 100% Canadian.
Absolutely.
But I like going to Trinidad for Carnival. It's
Yep.
part of my history. I think the thing with the flag is the people's flag. The flag is getting used right now in some ways that make me a little sad, because it's polarizing now. Like the flag, if you fly a flag and you drive a pickup truck, that's a symbol right now, right?
Yep.
Or we could take the flag and make it black and white,
Yep.
and we're subverting the flag somehow.
Yep.
Like lots of things are happening with this flag, and maybe because it's the people's flag, we should be okay with that. To what we were saying earlier, maybe I shouldn't be upset about that. It should just be like, Rhonda, let them do their thing. But I feel like a flag is kind of a very sacred thing. I do feel like that. The rainbow flag, I think, says to the students who come in here that I will talk to you just as I will talk to anybody else. I got my Vic flag, I got that. I want my Canadian flag there. I don't have to have a big Canadian flag, because the biggest one, the biggest
Right.
flag
Is on top of the Vic building.
and that is my view.
Yeah.
But it's only my view. No one else can see it.
Right.
And I just had it changed because it was starting to look a little ratty. And
Right,
they
yeah,
just
yeah.
had they just put up the new one. But it's like no one can see it.
Right.
I stood at the arch. I didn't know we had a flag until I came into this office.
Oh, wow.
Right? And
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
stand at my desk, and I have a standing desk, I see that flag all the time. That's in my sights. So I've been talking to my infrastructure people, because I get to do, this is the job I have, of where can we put a flagpole up,
Yep.
so people can see the flag here
Yeah.
a bit better. And so we've been looking at a couple spots. I think we've identified the right spot. Somebody just knocked down, reversed into a pole and took it out. So now we have to think about what if people drive funny.
Yeah.
But it bothers me that there isn't I don't have a place. Now the flag technically is supposed to be at the highest point or something or the other. So I'm not going to take down that
Yeah, yeah.
one. But I just want one where people can see it and remember they're in Canada.
Yeah. Even tiny stuff like this.
Yeah,
like
I
think it's great to come here,
Yeah.
and you're a student from India or from
Yes,
China,
yes,
and
and
you
they
see
love
the
it.
absolutely.
They actually
you
wear
see
the
the
flag
diversity.
more. Yeah,
Exactly. You see
yeah.
the diversity. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't realize that people could be this open, this
Exactly.
accepting.
And
Why are we like this?
We represent that.
Exactly.
You know,
So
and that's why I love the Olympics. And
Yep.
like, you know, you get
Yep.
to see it in a really visceral way.
100%.
So I think you're right. I think it's a really powerful symbol. Canada happens to have a nice flag.
Yep.
So that's good too. But I think you're right in the sense that I don't think there shouldn't be other flags, but the highest flag is, we're a government supported institution.
100%.
We need to have, the Canadian flag needs to be flown and shown, and we should talk about it more.
Yeah.
Like national identity is always like one of those slippery things like culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to shift over time, obviously.
Yep.
Canadians should be more proud of Canada. I always feel like there's this this subtle, don't want to be too boastful thing about Canadians, but
Yep.
you travel anywhere in the world, man, they put that flag right on that backpack anywhere
That's
you
right.
go. It's like, I am Canadian.
That's right. That's
Do
right.
not mistake me
Exactly.
for anybody else.
And I'm not even saying, once again, I'm not saying
Yeah.
replace this flag. I'm
No.
saying, because
Show
like
it
I
off.
see it everywhere. I see
Yeah.
like you'll have it in, I'm trying to think of all the other, we had it on the wall here, the Northrop
Yes.
Frye building, flying the rainbow flag.
Yes.
You have it in Ned's Cafe. You have it in the
Yeah.
Margad front
Yeah.
desk. You have it on the floors, like decor board.
But
It's
where's the
everywhere.
Canadian one?
That's right. I'm thinking like, I would be fine with even paying for it myself, because I've tried to email people. I'm like, I love this country. I think
Yeah.
that it's great to advertise these values with this image. And I once again, I don't know why
You
it's
don't
not
need to
already
pay
a
for it.
thing.
Don't worry, I'm on it. So we're I have talked to my infrastructure person. They gave me 3 options. I think we've settled now on the one where I want it, and
Yep.
it's gonna probably be in front of VoV. That's, I think, the best location, because I want it central. I don't want to hide it it has to be somewhere where we all see it. The pride flag was never flown here. When I came out, it was actually the same argument, other flag,
Yeah.
where it said we never, before I came on Pride Day, we didn't have a single pride flag,
Yeah.
not one. And so I was like, fine, go ahead. But I equally need to have the Canadian flag more visible. We
Right.
have it. It's at the tallest point. It's always there.
Yeah, yeah.
When I do half mast, nobody knows.
Sorry?
Like when it's at half mast,
Oh,
no
yeah.
one knows.
Right. Yeah.
Because they
100%.
can't see it in the first
That's
place.
right. That's right.
It gets even lower.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, forget it. It's
Yeah.
never here.
That's right.
But I'm with you. I'm a proud Canadian. I'm really proud immigrant. I
Yeah.
chose this country,
That's awesome.
right? And
Yeah.
this I feel pretty strongly. And a lot of my staff feel the same way. A lot of people coming from even those that are born here would like to see it there.
Yeah.
So flag is incoming. I did clean up the other one, but you can't tell. Before you
go.
leave, you can go look at it.
Absolutely.
It's the best view.
Absolutely. How much time did she say we have?
5.
5 minutes?
That's usually
Okay.
the 5-minute mark.
Last topic.
Yep.
And then we can move on here. There was an incident
Mm-hmm.
with the VUSAC elections last year.
Okay.
And there was a student running for community commissioner. His name's Jacob Stuchny, and I had him on for an episode of this. Disqualified
I don't
for...
think I know this, but
You don't think you know?
yeah.
Okay. Disqualified for commenting on an Instagram forum what was claimed to be a racist remark. And I took issue to this because, once again, I think that this was another example of suppression of this freedom of expression. I want to read it to you,
Sure.
and you can give me your thoughts on whether this merited a disqualification. So it was responding to police safety for commuters, and basically
Commuters. Okay.
for commuters, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically on the subways, there's been crime.
I see.
And there was a student asking, how are you going to advocate for police-free solutions? Because their idea was that
Free. They
police-free.
They want to defund. This is the defund the police people.
Right. Yes. And they were saying yes because the police are more racist, this, that. This is what he commented. Once again, agreeing or disagreeing with him, I'm not even
Right.
talking about that. I'm just saying, is this racist? I don't want to say racist enough, but is this even racist to
Right.
merit disqualification? He said, an increase in the number of police will directly increase the number of arrests. Logically speaking, it should be a positive correlation, compounded with the fact that black people commit crimes at disproportionately higher rates, citing a source, than any other race. It would make sense the increasing police presence of police in majority black cities would lead to a statistically significant increase in arrests against blacks. You should also consider that in these cities there are good, willing, middle-class black families, black small business owners, and many others whose livelihoods are now more protected from burglary and other crimes. Notice that nowhere in the study does it state that an increase in police presence led to an increase in crime or violent incidents. Again, police have a net positive effect on the community. I extend the same offer to you if you would like to meet in person one-on-one and discuss my biases. I would be very happy to set that up. Now, once again, I think this is an issue that should be debated. You can talk about it. Disqualification, I think, was too far.
Who disqualified? Do you know?
It was a CRO, I believe. So
CRO, what's that mean? Is that
it's
a
the
student?
chief returning officer of VUSAC.
Oh, so it was a
It was a student.
Okay, so student organization sanctioned a student who went up for. Yeah, interesting. I don't, one thing, I don't know this young person.
Right.
I only know what you just read. And I don't know the rules. Like, I don't know if you're not supposed to say whatever.
Yep.
Sounds to me more that the biggest crime there was more, I would say, using the wrong research.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto literally has its own report on policing that came out 2 years ago.
Yep.
It's pretty recent. Independent group, really good research, really good, like proper, long. It took a long time to get out. I think that one probably does demonstrate a slightly different story.
Okay.
But whether I agree or not, I don't know that I think you could have still seen what the vote would have done. Like I think people would have probably done what I just did, which is say, did you use your right research?
100%.
Are you qualified to make the statements you just made?
Absolutely. Yep.
Which is what voting does. It says
That's right.
And that's why people have debates and say, well, we'll put up the topic.
Exactly.
And then be able to say that made no sense.
Yeah.
Right. Or you didn't use, your research was impoverished. You didn't use the latest data that actually shows that in a city like Toronto, we do have an issue where disproportionate amounts of people are arrested for crimes that are the same in different populations.
Yep.
Whatever. There's
100%.
proper stuff. I don't know that I don't want to come out and say to VUSAC, you were wrong to do that. I don't know what their decision points were. But I would say based on that one statement, I would hope that it would go into discussion and debate, and it would go into letting people interrogate that and decide for themselves. But I did have a very contentious discussion with members of VUSAC back then, not now, about the police and policing. So I kind of have a sense that in that moment, I kind of know the people who were having that debate, because they were saying to me they wanted no police on campus. You know, they were really pro defunding the police and so forth. And I was like, well, people's physical safety is my responsibility.
Right. It's not on their hands if something goes wrong.
Right. It's me. I wear that. Also, community policing says that they can help you get you into your locked out apartment. They can. They're not just here to like.
To get you.
I don't know. Be a they're here to the guy who comes into Emmanuel College and throws furniture off the balcony on a regular basis.
Doesn't always have to be a bad experience with the police.
No, it doesn't.
No, they're there to do good.
And in fact, I know for a fact, I have seen the police here, campus police and our security team at Vic, sit down like on the floor with students who are in a crisis and talk them down. So I don't know. I don't subscribe to we have had to do better with police training on mental health. Everyone agrees, I hope, that was not good before. People with autism getting tased and hurt and whatever. It was bad news. I think the police have come a long way, and I did share that information with people. So I don't know why they did it. I would hope, again, back to our original conversation, that the tent is big enough for these kinds of discussions. If someone thinks that is racist, they come and they have that discussion and say.
The only fix to bad speech is better speech, in my opinion.
And the only thing to bad research is better research.
Right.
Bring it.
Right. Yeah,
that's what we're
100%.
here to do. We should know how to do that.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
Rhonda, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It's a pleasure
Thank
to chat
you very
with you.
much.
I'm so glad you said yes.
I am personally, it was an honor to receive that email saying that you wanted to set this up and even to do it in the president's office. Absolutely. I can't be more grateful. I'm honestly also very pleasantly surprised by the dialogue we've had. I guess, people come in. I definitely didn't think it was going to go the way it went. I think that you are very fair and balanced in your views. And I guess sometimes we as students just think that the culture that manifests itself in the university is being perhaps orchestrated from the top.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
Things happen on their own. And yeah, you've been incredibly fair. Ladies and gentlemen, before you go, actually, sorry, I got you this gift.
Oh, thank you.
Christmas season.
Thank you so much.
You can take that.
Thank you. And Christmas is literally my favorite.
There you go. There you go. There's a few goodies in there.
Thank you very much. And I hope I gave you something. I didn't have something for you, but I hope we...
The conversation. This was the gift.
Yes, it's a gift. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much. Ladies and
good
gentlemen.
luck with 4th year.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is President Rhonda N. McEwen. You can follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vic. This is episode 84, and we will see you next Sunday. Peace out.
Thank you.